Hi everyone, we'll get started in a few seconds. All right, let's jump in. Hi everyone, I'm Wayne Sutton, head of community events at Convex. Excited for everyone to join us for our first virtual event in our new Spotlight series. And today I'm excited to welcome Tom Ballinger. Tom is a software engineer at Convex and he's pretty awesome. And he's going to go over building with TanStack Start with Convex. Tom, welcome to the stage.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. Appreciate it. That's great. Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Great. Okay, and I've got a thing up. Cool. So what I want to talk about right today is well, there's a bunch of things, right? So I'll try to we got to keep them all straight. So there's Convex. It's the place I work. That's this cool backend database that is reactive. It can kind of do all your durable execution. It can kind of power your whole backend. And then there's this thing called TanStack. And TanStack is this idea. It's this loose conglomeration of libraries that are all related, and that Tanner Lindsay, this kind of genius in the middle, initiated all of them. But there's a lot of other people working on them. And they form together, there are a bunch of useful libraries that can be used together, but are often used separately. The most popular of these is TanStack Query. And if you haven't used this, I would, just beyond using Convex, I would recommend checking it out. It is a kind of the conglomeration, the aggregation of our learnings about dealing with server-side state from the front end, and its best practices from that. It's realizing that, after Redux, we figured out, gosh, some of the state that we have is different than the other state. Some of it is server state. Some of this is the asynchronous state that is coming from somewhere else, usually a server, but TanStack Query can deal with any kind of asynchronous state coming from anywhere. And when we were in Redux, it seemed like the solution to global state in React. And then TanStack Query said, well, let's take the pieces of those that are sort of read-only, they're sort of slowly changing, but we might want to update them quickly, but they are different. They do not transactionally update with changes to the React tree, and said, let's deal with those separately, and let's deal with them relatively globally. And let's do that let's deal with them globally in a way that doesn't restrict us. It doesn't require the complexity of Redux where I wire up all this globalness. I can have a query key that's sort of implicit that lets me share the state from my server with all of my React components. And this idea it's a big idea. It's caught on a lot. And a lot of things are kind of inspired by this or evolved at the same time as it. Things like the Apollo client or RTK toolkit, the new kind of Redux way it's done, and also Convex. The way that the Convex client-side libraries work is very inspired by this idea of let's treat this other state separately. Great. Well, I see heads up Luma link's broken. Okay, cool. Wayne's on it, I'm sure. So there's TanStack Query, and then there is TanStack Start. And these are two different things. TanStack Query is this let's deal with state from the server in a uniform way. And then there is let's deal with, then TanStack Start is let's have a more type-safe routing interface. That was kind of TanStack Router. Let's have type-safe routing. And then TanStack Start is, what? Could we do some of these things differently? Could we chart a sort of new course for React, which is sort of client SPA first, maybe, or SPA as a kind of first-class citizen? Often we do have these interactive apps which are interacting with the backend. Something like React Query is very useful here. They're long-running sessions. These are things like dashboards, things that are interactive, things that are kind of everything short of e-commerce, but maybe including e-commerce too, but something where you have an interactive session that is continuing and you'd like to preserve the state of these pages over time. And so there's a lot of ideas there. I don't have time to talk too much about them. I want to refer to this video here, this early glimpse of TanStack Start, which we're not going to watch, but check it out. This is Tanner pitching you on TanStack Start, this framework that beyond just your type-safe routing gives you the tools that you need to, I mean, it really is a, competitor to Next.js is putting it strongly, right? But it's a competitor to Next.js. It is saying, here's another way, or Remix, here's another way to think about the long lives of our React components. And it is a little bit more on the client side and saying, these React components will stick around. You probably will use something like React Query to cache these results. And it's a pretty neat thing. And we were really interested in it at Convex because, okay, well, we're looking at TanStack Start still. We were interested because it's this client-oriented approach is one that we've heard our customers be very interested in. They've said things like, hey, we'd like to be able to have these instant page transitions where the whole app is already loaded and I'm not loading additional JavaScript. We'd like to be able to have this cached data already present to have you maybe even a local store. Maybe even we do some sync kinds of things. And that's very much the Convex approach. Convex, right, is a sync platform. And it just felt like a good match where it was our customers that were asking for both of these things. Now to tell you what Convex is, maybe I can skip some of that because a lot of you got here through, Convex. Okay, it looks like we have some link changing now. So some folks just coming in. What's the summary so far? There's a thing called TanStack. We'll get to it later. And I'm not supposed to be reading comments, but I'm already, thanks, Ben. Yeah, TanStack and Convex, a mix of what people kind of want from server components mixed with just enough local first feeling to keep the React. You're hitting so many things here, Ben. Yeah, just enough local first feel to keep the React people know and love. That React people know and love is sort of rooted in, if you learned React with Create React App back in the day, it is that model. It is like, look, you have a bunch of React stuff. Or if you've ever used React without a framework and you were in some other framework and you just papered over the existing, the backend framework, but you were using React just for your front end state, just for making things interactive. And then you just extend that gradually. That's sort of this React query and then also TanStack Start approach. Let's see. So then I got to tell you about Convex. Most of you, maybe you heard about Convex. Maybe that's why you're here. Convex is this backend that can power your whole app. And there were some ways that we could integrate it especially well with TanStack Start. We heard about TanStack Start and said, this sounds pretty neat. Oh, not supposed to be there yet. TanStack Start. This sounds pretty neat. Tanner, let's talk. And we ended up being able to be sponsors of, along with Vercel, Clerk, and Sentry. They're calling us partners here. That's an even better word. Wow. But we're a partner at TanStack Start. And some of that is true. We have been working with them for a while. It's an open source project, so anyone can be part of this process. But we've been part of the process of figuring out how some of these things are going to work. And that's been exciting because we can integrate deeply with TanStack Start. But the way that we're doing that is very open, right? This is not a matter of there being lots of hard-coded things for Convex in the TanStack Start framework. This is Tanner saying, we want to have great integration with React Query. And React Query is a general enough framework, general enough library that you can get all the integration out of that you want. So I doubt that Convex is going to be the only platform embracing this. We're just, I think, here early because we're able to be a partner. So first integration to know about is, let's see, Convex with TanStack Query. This came out a few months ago. It was motivated by the TanStack Start stuff, but it was saying, like, you know what? There's this popular library called React Query, or called TanStack Query, that a lot of people are using to manage state. And that fits pretty well with how Convex works. It's a little different because generally with React Query, you are, I should bump this up for size, huh? Generally, with React Query, you are polling. You are hitting endpoints on your server, getting the new result, and then maybe every time people come back to the page, you poll again. Or every time maybe 30 seconds elapses, you poll for this data again. And Convex is a little different. When you use Convex, you have a consistent client view of every one of your queries at every point in time. You never have stale results. But the interface that you want to interact with that is similar. It's often this useQuery hook, where you say, can you just give me a reactive hook, meaning this is a React specific thing. There are versions for other frameworks, but this is a React hook called useQuery that, just like the Convex useQuery, gives you some data, and then it does give you other pieces of information in the Convex libraries we've exposed differently that people have been asking for. People have said, gosh, could you just give us this is pending property, or loading it's sometimes called, and could you give us the error right here instead of throwing the error? And we've written some Convex helpers to provide that, but this is kind of the extreme of just saying, yeah, absolutely, use React Query. That's a great interface, but we will plug into it in such a way that you will get the benefits of Convex, which are these never stale queries. So there's not too much with it, like too much to learn to use TanStack Query or React Query with Convex. You install a library called Convex Dev React Query, and then you hook things up a little bit. These are the setup steps here. And after that, you get to say things like use query, and then we have something called a query factory here. This build or query on options factory. This is an idea that TKO was talking about, query options factory. This idea of, gosh, it's nice to have a function that wraps up this idea of what the query key is, what the query function is, what the stale time is. Don't need to worry about this stuff. This Convex query function returns that. And you end up building apps like this. It's a lot like Convex, right? The native Convex hooks. And you can spread those options into an object if you want to add some TanStack query options. Here we're adding a GC time or some initial data. But it's a mesh that works pretty well. And if you look at the code for the integration, it's I don't know, it's like 200 lines of code or something. It's just enough to talk to the TanStack query client and notify it based on the WebSocket messages coming down your Convex WebSocket server that, hey, this query has updated. These things have changed. These things have been unsubscribed to. So this is a slick integration. You can use this anywhere you're using React Query and Convex. But the motivation for us doing this really was this TanStack Start thing. So if you're using TanStack Start, great, interesting framework. We won't have much time to talk about how it's unique, how it's different, but check out this video here for some of that. Now you can use TanStack Start with it. There's a quick start guide here. We'll look at an example in a sec. You can look at, there's documentation. Let's see, TanStack Start with Convex that walks through some of these benefits. Well, I guess we'll go through these real quick. So live updating queries with React Query, that's because that's just what React Query gives you when you use it with Convex. Subscription session resumptions. This is about SSR. This is about getting an initial server-side render that looks like your app, it is your app, and it's got all of the results you had to query for in Convex at a specific timestamp that's consistent. Render that first, and then we hydrate it and make it live. Now, this is a less common occurrence in TanStack Start than it is, say, in Next.js, because most navigations are client-based navigations. It's only that very first render that's going to do SSR. But that SSR is still very important, right? That initial render still matters a lot for a lot of things. And this session resumption is about making those Convex subscriptions to queries simpler to set up. So you can, with Next.js, you can do this too. Next.js Convex SSR. Let's look at the guide here. It walks through how to do this. You're going to preload the query on the server side and then get the data and then pass it through via a server component. And then on the client side, set that as your initial data. Use this with this use preloaded query. It's very doable stuff. But it's a little simpler with TanStack Start. It's just this simple use query. Oops, where'd we go? Here we go. No, here we go. So you use one hook to say, I want to preload this data during that initial server-side render, and then also when I navigate from the client side, or after I've loaded that and I need a live subscription that updates, give you that same data. Loader-based preloading and fetching, these are features of TanStack Start that are pretty slick, similar to Remix's nested loaders. These are ways to specify declaratively, but in two places potentially, both in your component and at the route level, that this route needs this data, and that data can be used for prefetching. So when I hover over a link, we'll see this in a sec. When I hover over a link, we can load that data ahead of time so that the navigation will be instant. We've got a consistent logical query timestamp during SSR. I mentioned this already, but during that SSR, we can get consistent results. You can get the list of users and the list of messages for your chat app at the same point in time. So it's safe to client-side join them, or it's safe to, on the server side, say, these are the users, these are the channels, these are the messages at that one point in time. I don't have to worry about having a message that doesn't have a user that exists yet. Component local, that's our useQuery hook, use suspense query. We'll go through this a bit, but instead of walking through this, I just want to jump into code, and we can take a look at that. If anyone has, I'm glancing at chat, so happy to go on tangents here. But let's go ahead and get into this code. This is a little demo app that I set up. Great, we're running it locally. Cool. And let's just look at some of the basics of how a TanStack Start app works. Let's use VS Code. It's the friendliest way to do all this. I don't use VS Code a ton. Here we go. So in one of these, you have there's some setup. Let's ignore the setup stuff first. We've got a routes directory, and in there we have a root, which is stuff that's common to every single spot. But let's just jump right to our index page. This is the equivalent of what we are looking at here. Let's see. The way that you write a route with TanStack Start, robotic, huh? Can do it louder. I don't know if that helps, if it's being post-processed. In TanStack Start, every route has this route object that you create with a create file route here. We're saying, hey, at the slash location, and slash because this is called index, here's the component I'd like you to render. You can add some additional data here, like, I want you to load some other stuff as well, but this is the basic. And you specify a component, right? Very familiar file-based routing. We've got, great, maybe I'll bump it more. Let's see. I specify a component here. It looks like I am making a array and some more arrays. Like just doing regular React-y stuff. Got some Tailwind going on. Pretty general stuff, right? We're used to this. There's no dynamic data on this page. It's just going to render like this. Let's look at another page here it is, right? Let's look at the next page where we talk about using React query hooks. That one is React-query. Great. Let's go there. React-query. So in this route object, we create a file route still at /React query. Now, TanStack does some slick dev tooly things where if I create a new file here, it's going to automatically create this create file thing with the right path here. But it is explicit. And I really appreciate this blending of kind of file-based and explicit routing, where I can see from the code, okay, we're talking about the /React query route here. The component we're going to load is React query, but also I would like during the loading process, so this is code that will run before that page actually loads, I'd like us to load the isSimulatingTraffic convex function. And I want to keep that around for about 2 seconds. That's our 2000 milliseconds here. So we're going to stay subscribed to that query for a little bit. Let's see what that's powering here. So we're using the React query integration for TanStack Start. I'm get React query, TanStack query, the same thing, right? And we're saying, hey, I want this to be prefetched and keep it around for 2 seconds. And that way, when I refer to it here, it's probably already going to be loaded. And I won't have to have a loading state. And also, even if I didn't have this loader, I would still get that loading behavior of this thing being ready. I just wouldn't have preloaded it, so it wouldn't already be there. So we'd see this slight delay in that client load. We'll see this better on an example later. So let's look at the content, because I probably explain it better there. TanStack Start apps can use React query, and we use this convex query thing. We saw that already in the other docs. Here is a little chat app. Cool. Looks great. Well, actually the first thing we saw was a simulating thing. Let's click on simulate traffic, and you'll see, let's see, nothing at all happen. Let's see, is anything hooked up here? Nothing seems hooked up. Let's look at the browser and see what's going on. We could just hop to the prod one too if this is not going to work. We load this, and then, okay, let's just hop to prod. I know that's working. Convex, there we go. Let's look at this one. See if this is working. Yeah, working here. Great. When I hit this simulate chat traffic thing, I get this little spinner, and that state is actually coming from the server. We can see that if we do a go hop to that data here. I'm looking at dev now. Let's hop over to prod. And we can see, and we'll have to be quick, when I hit this button, right, that's changing some state on this backend, and then this thing goes away in about 2 seconds, 3 seconds or something, and then that state's reflected here. So that's the reactivity of Convex, right? Writing that code was pretty simple here because let's look at that simulate traffic thing. Simulate traffic. All I had to do was say, show if the simulation is running, which was defined as the use suspense query for is simulating traffic. If that is currently on, show one thing, otherwise show another thing. But the refreshing is taken care of for me, right? And if I did this with React query, I get something like this, but I wouldn't have that really quick reaction to that thing happening after 2 seconds, right? I would have to, maybe I could poll for it every 5 seconds or poll for it every 2 seconds, but I might be off a little bit for when I do my polling. So the nice piece here is this instant, these messages being pushed. Other things that are nice about that are, say we open up our data here and I can change this data, right? I can go to these messages and looks like, hi. You know what? There's just too much stuff here, so I'm just going to clear it. Okay, all gone. Simulate some traffic, app traffic again. Great. Now it's a small number so that I can find the right one. Okay, that's enough. Looks like this is our most recent. I can, yeah, it's fine. I know I'm changing prod data. Don't worry about it. Again, we're going to see this update just happen instantly. So I can change it to, actually, I wanted to ask Wayne about his favorite ice cream place, right? Hit enter, that data is pushed here instantly. So that's how we've wired up, right, this reactivity of Convex into the app via the React query integration. But let's go back to TanStack Start. That's what this is about. Hopefully you're aware of the cool Convex stuff already. It's slick that we have this one piece of data that we're able to have wired all the way through here. And we're doing that via simple React query, or TanStack query. What else is supposed to learn on this page? Yeah, that's just that it's instant, I guess. You'll see that I didn't actually wire this up to pass your message through. I guess while we are learning about Convex, let's look at how some of these pieces work. So back here in the code, I said use suspense query for the API messages is simulating traffic. I can command click on that piece and jump over to the Convex folder where I have is simulating traffic. We see that it's a function defined that is just a query of the simulating table. I grab every row in it, and then I check to see the length of that thing is non-zero. Or I guess I'm double doing it. So yeah, non-zero. And that close attachment of your back end and your front end is a cool aspect here. All right, hop back. What other data do we have? It looks like there's a our simulate. This is how we do mutations. Wire up where. See, where is it? Button, class name on click, calls send traffic. We can see that send traffic is this use convex mutation. And hop over to that, see what it is. Okay, it's something that modifies this. Ooh, great question. I'm going to get so dragged out by these chat messages, and that's great. Thanks, Drillsild. Why don't all backend services provide the same reactivity as convex? Well, it's quite an architecture choice, right? It's a very different thing. Reactivity means, so reactivity can either be provided, say, by polling, by checking what the result was, say 10 times a second, once a minute, whatever. Or you have to be able to tell when you make a change, which queries that affects. And we're familiar with this with front-end programming, right? Because that's how React works, except it just kind of re-renders everything, or how Svelte or Solid works, where there's a signal that sets this thing up. But we actually don't write backend code in that way, right? We don't describe these things as, I don't write backend endpoints as though they're not all wired up with signals. We don't write them with signals. And so to do this, you have to do something special. The thing that Convex is doing special is quite an investment. Right? Other people have done things like this, but it really is unique to have this convex method of you will write normal JavaScript here, right? This is just, it's async, it's just async JavaScript. And somehow convex manages to track the query sets of things like is simulating traffic here. And then when simulating traffic changes, it knows to rerun this one and not to rerun everything else, right? One way you might do subscriptions is just by repeatedly running these queries, and we're being a little smarter here. And that's a big change, right? So Convex is not a SQL database. It's not using an existing, there's very mature technology that chooses not to do this. That's why other people don't do it, because it's a pretty new thing, or at least it's a different set of choices. Is there a reason someone would use server-sent events with Convex? Generally not, because you're getting these messages over the WebSocket already. And you can do that. You can write an HTTP endpoint in Convex that will, you can have a long-running action that will keep sending those server-side events. So that's possible. But generally, you're happy with the WebSocket events you receive. And if you want the equivalent of a server-side event, you just want something that will change something on the front end, then you just change the data, and the query that was reading that data will update. That's the message that will be sent over. And that's often a simpler way to program, right? So instead of writing pub/sub, instead of having two data write paths, one of which changes the durable data and the other one tries to identify which clients would be interested in a change and broadcasting it to them, that's what Convex is doing. Yeah, great question, Ben. So generally not, but it's totally possible. You can have these HTTP endpoints where we have streaming, and that's kind of all you need for server-side events. You just need some HTTP endpoint that will stream. And sometimes you do want that because you have an existing API or you have a library you need to support that expects that, right? But generally, and let's hop over here. Let's look at that WebSocket. You're getting sort of the equivalent of your server-side events here. If I look at this sync and we look at these messages, we can see that when I'm clicking things, we're sending up the mutation, and then we're receiving transitions from the server that something has changed. And sure, these could be server-sent events if we had a long-running, that it would be similar long polling HTTP endpoint. But it's just slicker to use the data flow that has been set up by the Convex client. Yes, it's exactly. So it's using WebSockets. And you can watch these changes coming down, right? And it's kind of neat. I mean, this mutation part, that's pretty general. There's lots of platforms that would do something like that, where you, of course, you make a post request or something to make a change. But here, we're also receiving these changes. And you can see it's a long-running one with these little ping requests. Let's see. Okay, let's keep going. So open this page. It's live. I showed you the data, and that's how we could prove it's live. But you could also... and by live, I mean live across different clients. This data really is coming from the server. It's not just that I wired up some React state to say when I hit enter, change this. Okay, let's go to the next piece. SSR and live queries. So this is where we're going to talk about the differences with use suspense query on the left and just a simple use query on the right. These are both React query hooks. Use suspense query and what's different about them is one of them, right, you have to deal with loading state, and the other one you don't. So suspense is, especially for data loading, is this way of saying, here's what I want to render here, But if there's something that I'm not ready to render yet, then fall back to something at a higher level. Somewhere higher up in your React tree, you get to say, I'd like to render this fallback UI. I'd like to do this thing differently, right? Excuse me. And if there's never a suspense boundary at any point to the top in TanStack Start, then it'll just delay the rendering of that page, which can be nice behavior. Say I'm actually over here at example.com, I'm doing my thing. I want to navigate to that page we were just on. When I do that, you'll see that this side, this left where I used a useSuspense query, loaded immediately because we blocked the loading of the page on the server on getting that data. And then this one here on the right did not load immediately. It wasn't until we got to the client. So on the server, it actually rendered nothing. And then on the client, it waited until we got that WebSocket subscription up and received the data at that point. And sometimes you want either of these behaviors, right? On a simple site, you probably want this useSuspense query for everything. But as your site gets bigger and you're worried about decreasing that initial load time, maybe you want to go to this useQuery where you have a skeleton, right? You write up some skeleton code. I think I wrote skeleton code for this, but it's not showing up super well because I made it the same color because that experience seemed fine. But the gist is, it's less work to do this, right? When you're prototyping, I really like using useSuspense query. And then for most of my code, I keep using useSuspense query. But then sometimes I want to be able to show something on the page without showing something else yet. And then you can do this. It's really just when you get into data waterfalls, and I think that makes sense. Most of the time, useSuspense query seems nicer. Here's what the code for each of those looks like. And then next, we're going to talk about loaders. So let me know any questions on that. This suspense thing it's pretty exciting. It's the way that I would like to, the nice thing is I just have to specify the data I want in one spot, right? I don't lose component locality. And this is a big deal. And it's sort of controversial because, yeah, absolutely, component locality is huge, right? But there are some laws of physics that you can't break. You have to, or we haven't broken yet. There's things you could do, but say that you have a query which you use data from that to fire the next query and use data from that to fire the next query. You get these waterfalls. There's this Theo video in here around, the whole thing he's talking about this, but I feel like it's around 25, 26 where he's getting into this. And he's going over this tweet from Tanner about how Tanner sees sort of a future for this kind of thing. It really is nice to be able to preserve that component locality where you specify what data you want in that one component. But there are times where, and some of the other folks in the React community are saying, but I can't deal with those waterfalls. I really need to know at the page level everything I'm going to be able to use. And there are things that solve both of them, but they're sort of exclusive. There's not a lot of people using GraphQL fragments to patch together for a given React tree the entire data tree that you need. And if you do that, then yes, you can get in a single query, you can get this data. In Convex, you'd end up just writing all that in a single query because those are cheap to do, and then loading that data directly. But there's these trade-offs, right? So there's lots of discussion about this. But the powerful thing about TanStack Start is that it gives you the ability to just choose whichever one you want, right? You're not buying into this framework with, okay, I hope this is the future. You're being given the tool of useSuspense query, which is beautiful, has component locality. But then if you want, you can use a loader. So let's hop ahead to loaders. Here are 3 versions of this page. This is the 0th version, but there's going to be 1, 2, and 3. Here is one where I say in the loader, query client.ensure query data, which means that it's going to be immediately loaded when I get there. Oh, we better get some messages in here. It's going to be immediately loaded when I get there. Here's another page where I'm going to start preloading it. And because I'm hovered over with my mouse, we knew to preload it. And then here's one without any preloading at all. And that's the one where, I guess I need messages in each of these channels. Put some different messages in. Great. 1 message, 3 messages, 2 messages. So when I'm hopping between these, this one's always going to load instantly because, appear to load instantly, right? But there's 2 pieces to that. One is when I hover my mouse over the link, it's going to preload the right data. And then when I click it, I waited too long there. But when I go in and I click it, we're going to get that data immediately. Here's one where if I do it just right, and in fact, if I don't move my mouse out, we won't get the preload behavior. So I will see, okay, it has that loading. And then here's one where it doesn't matter what I do with my mouse because we don't have the preloading at all. We always get that behavior. And if we look at the code for these 3 pages, we'll see the differences in their loaders. Oh, we don't have to because I put it right here. Great. Here, we just have a component that renders the data. Here, we have a loader, which does the prefetch of this. And then here we have the wait to even render this page until we have that thing ready. And this is the options. And Tanner has a great video, right? If you look at this video around here, he's talking about this. Here it is. On one side, right, we have await, and then we have prefetch query and use suspense query and use query, depending on what your needs are. TanStack gives you all of these. Now, a lot of the time, I like to start with use suspense query because it just gives me my data with a clean SSR load, and I don't have to worry about loading states. But you have the options to try different things there. I'm telling you the code looks like this, but I guess let's look at the real code just to prove that. Here are our loader routes. So this is the one where I say, hey, in my loader, I would like to ensure that we really do have that thing loaded. And then this GC times and keep it loaded for stay subscribed to that query for 10 seconds. Here, I've got no loader at all. And the route just says, great, load this data. And here I am prefetching the data, which means when I do the mouse over for the client navigations. So here's a key thing to think about with TanStack Start. There are 2 kinds of navigations. There is that very first initial page where you're going to need to render everything on the server that you want to be visible for that first, whatever, 200 milliseconds while you don't have things hydrated. And then there are client navigations. And of course, client navigations can be much more powerful because we've got that prefetching. On that mouse over, we can instruct the route what data needs to be loaded a little bit ahead of time. And also, maybe even without prefetching, we just had the data already loaded. And that's what React Query plus Convex are doing. You have a subscription to this thing already there. Here's where's one where okay, it's the staying subscribed one. So here I'm going to open the TanStack Query DevTools. And they show what queries we are currently subscribed to. Looks like we're subscribed to list messages, list messages in SF, list messages in the chatty channel, and whether we're simulating traffic or not. These 2 have zeros on them saying we are not currently, like this is a little stale, and we are going to unsubscribe to this at some point in time after 30 seconds. So if I wait a few more seconds, these 2 are going to drop off. But there's all this, kind of sort of magical already subscribed state that's happening all the time. Let's wait a little longer, wait for these to go away. And right now, I'm not subscribed to the New York channel yet. So when I click that, I should see some kind of delay. So we're in SF right now. Let's click on NYC. Oh, we saw a flash there because we had to wait for that. The WebSocket message had to be sent to the Convex backend to say, hey, there's another query I'm interested in. And then the message had to come back with, great, here are the results of that query. Now, for these toy examples, it's quite possible to just say on the top page here, hey, subscribe to all 3 of those. Like these are the things that are possible. But maybe it's a very large app where there's a bunch of channels, right? And you don't want to stay subscribed to every single one of those channels all the time. Now we're only subscribed to New York City. If we read about this, it says what's our GC time? GC time is 10 seconds. So once I leave the New York City Slack channel here or chat channel, for 10 seconds, I will have an instant load if I come back because I'm still subscribed. And we can prove that by looking at that. Well, now let's look at our sync here. We can see that we are still subscribed. So I'm going to go to New York. We are going to wait 10 seconds, and then there will be a new modify query set message sent to Convex saying stop subscribing. But right now, we are still subscribed to this SF channel. Okay, now it went away, right? And all this is configurable. You can say things like, just stay subscribed forever. As soon as you open one of these subscriptions, I want every update because I want those instant loads when I go back. Or you can do something reasonable like this 10 seconds. So if I saw a load there, right, while I loaded Seattle, but when I hop back to New York, instant, right? And if I'm switching between these quickly, SF1 had to load, they're all there. So can TanStack start with the loaders and then TanStack query with our GC time are giving you the power to describe what kind of data loading strategy you'd like to use here. And these client navigations that I'm doing here are the more powerful ones because we get to take advantage of all the queries we already have loaded. Versus if I do a server-side render of this New York page, just to be extra sure, I'm going to go to example.com. Great. Now let's go back to that page. Oh, this is just a client thing here. There's no separate page for New York. But when I get here, right, I had to do that load. It wasn't already preloaded. But when I'm doing these client navigations, even if I go away over to this page and then come back, these are still loaded, right? So that's this power of client navigations, which are possible in Next.js, but are more of a hassle. Making those closer to the default, making them like able to share state between these routes is very powerful. Okay, that was all the pages here that I wanted to talk about, right? And these are these core concepts. There's a lot more to learn about TanStack Start. So, I should back up. TanStack Start is not even in beta yet. It's close. They're working hard on it, right? But it is not yet at the point where, and obviously people do it because they have high standards. The TanStack team does. You can use this. I'm playing with it, right? And I wrote this site, but it is not yet in beta. Things are still potentially changing. But it works pretty well. If you're in a, I don't know, if you're doing something you have some freedom, I think it's a good time to start playing with it. Can I reiterate? Yes, it would be a better talk if I do reiterate. What is the benefit of TanStack Start plus Convex as compared to either alone? So with Convex, on any given page of your web app, you have these subscriptions that update instantly. With TanStack Start, you get to cache, it's TanStack Start plus TanStack Query. You get to cache some data and have it available between these page transitions, which is very powerful because you still have that old data to make those client navigations still work, right? Still be instant. Now, when you add Convex to that, when you use all these together, now that data won't be stale. It will still be up to date, right? So now when I'm hopping between this Seattle and New York, instead of getting to New York, seeing stale data, waiting for a second, and then the new data flashing in, I maintained the subscription the whole time so that I can come back to New York and just see it there. There are a lot of other benefits of Convex you're getting, like the consistent queries. Now, if I have two different queries on the same page, I'm getting them at the same logical timestamp from the database. And that makes writing these kinds of interfaces much easier. But that's kind of separate from the start piece. The real benefits of merging them directly are this caching and then the server-side behavior. The server-side rendering is just beautiful. It's so nice to use this use suspense query and not have to not have to duplicate your data loading in a loader when that's the right trade-off. So that refresh right there where the left side stays good, stays loaded, that's the thing where it really was a server-side render, but this data came through immediately and became live. It's those two pieces together, right? TanStack Start does a good job of getting that data there immediately, but then you're going to have the React query behavior of loading it every 15 seconds or refreshing it whenever the user comes back to the page. Convex gives you the live subscriptions where the data is never stale. And that makes a lot of things like that little progress bar a lot easier to write because instead of maybe checking in every few seconds to see if the simulation is still happening, we get a pushed event from the server. So there's so many pieces here, right? But the big benefit of TanStack Start plus Convex is that it's kind of the data loading dream. It's the thing we've always wanted. It is if you're writing React apps, but you want to have multiple pages, it's not just one big piece of state. How do you combine those two things? And it's this combination of the React query client being shared between the different pages that makes this possible. Okay, this use query of convex query with sockets and caching versus traditional CRUD type of fetching logic and so on. Yeah, you're answering the same question I am. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's Ben's answering Anthony's question. Yes, what Ben said. Ben, you said several great things. This is great. But for me, it is that, gosh, it is so much easier to get those initial server-side renders to be good, and that I can write a multi-page React app, which is a problem sometimes. The multi-page ones where you kind of simulate multi-pages, but you really do get multiple pages here. You get the routing, and you get all the type-safe stuff that comes with TanStack Start. That's this other huge benefit for the TanStack router, which TanStack Start uses of, gosh, I got to show off that piece. Let's look at this. Where is it? Here we go. Let's find a link somewhere. Do I have a link somewhere in here? Loaders, link. Yeah, I got one. Where is it? Find link. Here we link. There we go. Check this out. Check this out. It's just incredible. Quote, oh, these are all my routes. Here they are. Right? I'm never going to mistype one of these. Also, do they take query parameters? Great. I forget what it was. Loaders ensure. Cool. Am I going to pass the wrong search parameters to one of these? Is it ASDF1? No, it's not. What are the search parameters this thing requires? So it makes maintaining a larger site, which is still interactive, so much more possible, right? This is just one of the cool features of TanStack Start. You should watch Tanner's video for it. But it's the data loading that's really exciting. It is that data loading was such a hassle when I have to think about it for each page and kind of add up all of the different ways that I had to duplicate my data loading, and it really works better now. Hey, hi, Jamie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Cool.
This is Jamie, who made this sponsorship happen, CEO at Convex. And kind of promotes a bit of a vision. I'll let you talk about it, Jamie, but like this vision of like, gosh, couldn't things be easier? Couldn't it be preserve component local reasoning? And it's been very exciting to be helping make that happen.
Yeah, cool. And yeah, thanks, Tom, for running through all this. I think that, and there's a question there about the cost, which I'll answer too. But so we had this idea about what a much better way of doing backend engineering could be for projects, in practice, and rolled that out and iterated on it with developers. And like every new software project, it takes a lot of work to make your way toward the vision, but then things started feeling pretty good. We had a lot of developers that when Next 14 came out, they were excited to integrate deeper server-side rendering into their systems in order to get better performance and all that kind of stuff. Super understandable. But for a lot of the developers that were on Convex, the degree to which the choices shifted a lot of momentum server-side all of a sudden made a lot of the apps that were kind of trying to build in practice really confusing and the code very complicated, and like all these caching rules and stuff like that. And so ultimately, the thing that's so exciting about TanStack is that the way that Tanner and the team have approached this is much more aligned with like the kind of apps we actually see in practice, where like server-side rendering is awesome, but you kind of want to do just enough of it to get that first page load back. Your single page app is still this incredibly rich thing that you want to be excellent. And so that the kind of apps that people are trying to make with Convex, which are like sophisticated technology products, that's the right trade-off. Being like a whole new paradigm, and server components are default, and now there's like use cache, and like it's really Convex already knows everything about the freshness of data. It doesn't need you to tell us when to cache things and when not to cache it. We will cache everything possible, right? Like that's kind of like our job, right? Is part of how we see it. And so the complexity of, you can achieve all these things that Tom has demonstrated here, you can get on Next. Some Convex users have apps that do all this cool stuff on Next. You just have to write a lot more code, to be honest, and a lot of it can feel pretty complex and kind of convoluted. It feels like it's pulling you more into being some kind of like server-side cache management distributed system programmer instead of being an app developer, which is probably the reason you were excited to make software, right? So I think TanStack kind of helps us. It feels like this is an opportunity to like have your cake and eat it too. Like, yeah, let's get some of that server-side rendering happening. Let's get preloading support. But let's not completely give up on sort of like classic React kind of vibes, which had this really relatively clean, kind of nice client-side data flow paradigms. So yeah, that's what makes us so exciting. And as Tom said, it's still a little early. Our integration is new. TanStack Start is still alpha. It's not even beta yet. But the design and the early versions of it just are so promising and exciting to imagine what it will be like 2 months from now or something, that we're just very, very positive, optimistic on what a great combination these technologies will make. And Tanner is too, because Tanner's been playing around a little bit more with Convex and TanStack together. Cool. So catching up on some of these questions, some of them probably are also things that Tom can answer better than I can. But I do see the one about the cost. Yeah. So when you have a subscription attached to your Convex backend with useQuery or use Suspense query, if you're in TanStack Start, in the single page app, every time a mutation impacts some queries that your app is subscribed to, recomputing the server-side functions to give you those new computed responses counts as a function call in Convex parlance. And then if you go to our pricing page, you'll see that like function calls are one of the like resource units that like you get a whole bunch of them for free, and then you pay if you exceed like 25 million or 50 million, something like that. Check the pricing page. Don't quote me on that. So yes, if you have a highly reactive app with a lot of updates, those updates recompute things on the server and push updates out to subscribed applications. They do have a cost component associated with them. Yeah, the TanStack plus Convex plus ShadCN. I'll also throw in there these days, to be honest, like plus Cursor plus like one of the changes that a lot of our team had experienced is that like we built a lot of apps, and then just to test Convex out and make sure we weren't full of crap, right? Like, let's build on Convex a lot. And as Convex got better, the backend part of making apps started to get pretty smooth. And what was interesting is for a lot of us, even though we spent 20 years doing web development, or 30 years in some cases, hate to admit that, but like good old CSS and styling was still the place we would spend all of our time, like just getting the Tailwind stuff right and nudging the widths around and all this. And so and then I think in the last 6 months, even though maybe a year ago, the backend stuff started feeling really good because Convex had matured. Cursor plus Claude plus V0 has made the front end stuff now like pretty nice, because you can like just be like, yo, could you just give me the Tailwind ShadCN thing that like is a pretty good approximation of this, and that makes the application side stuff evolve really quickly too. So I think there's a stack that is just starting to emerge right now that's like amazingly good actually for making web apps and React Native apps. So I think I answered the pricing thing. I'm not sure if I missed any other question. Oh, Igor had a question about feeling kind of lost. I don't know, Tom, if you want to.
Oh, and then Igor replied 2 minutes later, never mind, just found out. Well, so
okay.
Our one sample for community is like, oh yeah, this is some new stuff to learn. It might take you, what is it, 2 minutes and about 6 seconds to learn it. But no, just under 2 minutes. But the pieces do fit together nicely.
Yeah, Tom mentioned one thing about like component local reasoning, which I'm kind of a tyrant about, probably too much, but
I love it.
Which is like, I think that as your app gets more and more complicated, one of the most beautiful things about React is like deterministic client-side data flow, which is awesome because now it's everywhere, right? Like Svelte 5 with runes and Vue and Solid. A lot of those arguably are better improvements of the React paradigm, but React really popularized a fairly world-changing kind of way to think about state. The world before that was much messier. But the other thing is that like the component is this shippable thing that you could reason about in isolation and be pretty sure that you sort of understood it and you knew how it would behave. And the thing I don't like about some of the server-side rendering is you're duplicating logic, right? Like it makes you re-specify all your dependencies, like all the data you depend on, you got to put like in your static props or whatever, and then in your server-side app. If you want to continue to have a rich SPA, and duplicating all that stuff in two places is a pain in the butt. I hate that because like you normally have to centralize it all in one place for the server side rendering. And then you can have this modular, nicely structured app in all your SPA stuff. And I think especially as apps grow, that gets to be very hard to maintain. Like all of this stuff in both places, it becomes a real pain. So use Suspense query is really cool because you get server side rendering without breaking client local reasoning. The component still just expresses the data it depends on. And I think that makes it just easier to develop apps, easier to reason about them, and easier to make bigger things with a larger team, and everyone can kind of understand the part they're working on. So TanStack greater than Next.js. I mean, my hot take is that I think TanStack's design is significantly better and more interesting than Next.js for most sort of like technology like products, like if you're making a non-trivial app. I think that Next.js's ecosystem is a real behemoth. So I don't want to undervalue like how much value you get out of a large ecosystem. So I think whether it's an easy decision or not, it's more complicated. It depends a lot on what you're making, and depends a lot on how much you want to be able to rely on just a million great libraries and example snippets and all that, which is worth a lot on the Next.js side. And Vercel already has a full-powered kind of service, and so do other providers that can host your Next.js apps really well. TanStack Start is earlier, but I think its design is exceptionally good. So the hope would be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road, like this stuff is feeling like really good, and you're starting to get a lot of those ecosystem benefits on the TanStack side as well. TanStack Start, I should say, because query and things like that are already killing it, and you should use them now. If you're not, use it now. It's just ready to go already. That amp is a 2-rock amp. If you know amps, that's a amp I wanted for a long time. I got like 8 years ago. I played guitar for 30 years or something. So, but yes, good question about the amp. You can recognize it in the blur. Cool. Did we miss anything, Wayne or Tom? I know we only have a couple minutes left. I want to make sure we didn't drop any questions.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Okay. I think we got everything. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, you.
Wayne, is it back to you?
Awesome. Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. And thanks, Jamie, to answer questions. And thanks, everyone, for watching. And we'll be back next month with another series on Local First and Sync for our next Spotlight event in December. So thanks for joining, everyone, and hope you see you in our Discord and see you online.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.